Hello everyone. So today I'm going to be discussing about the brainstem respiratory centers. The automatic unconscious cycle of breathing is controlled by three pairs of respiratory centers. And it is found in the reticular formation of the medulla oblongata and pons. So that's the image right there. There is one of each on the right and left sides of the brainstem. The two sides communicate with each other so that the respiratory muscles contract symmetrically. So now the first group or respiratory center I'm going to be talking about is the ventral respiratory group or VRG. That's the image right there. That's this one, VRG. The ventral respiratory group is the primary generator of the respiratory rhythm. It is an elongated nucleus in the medulla with two commingled webs of neurons, inspiratory neurons and expiratory neurons. The ventral respiratory group generates the rhythm of breathing. Its output goes to a spinal integrating center. Okay, so this red line is the indicator of output, and this is your spinal integrating center. So its output goes to a spinal integrating center that gives rise to intercostal nerves and phrenic nerves, to the intercostal muscles and diaphragm. Okay. Breathing can be faster or slower, shallower or deeper, because the VRG is subject to influence from external sources. Chief among these is the dorsal respiratory group. So that's the next center I'm going to be talking about. Dorsal respiratory group. And that is this one right here. It is another web of neurons that extends for much of the length of the medulla between the VRG and the central canal of the brainstem. The DRG is apparently an integrating center that receives input from several sources. Okay, so let's talk about those sources where the DRG receives input from. The DRG gets input from higher brain centers involved in emotional and voluntary influences on respiration, from the pontine respiratory group. This is the pontine respiratory group right here. From the chemosensitive area or central chemoreceptors. So this is the central chemoreceptors. And from peripheral chemoreceptors and stretch receptors by way of the vagus nerves and glossopharyngeal nerves. Now the DRG, the DRG issues output to the VRG. Okay, so as you can see, there is this connecting line from the DRG to the VRG, because it says the DRG issues output to the VRG that modifies the respiratory rhythm to adapt to varying conditions. Okay. Now the last respiratory group or center is the pontine respiratory group. formerly called the pneumotaxic center. It modifies the rhythm of the VRG. The pontine group receives input from higher brain centers, including the hypothalamus, limbic system, and cerebral cortex. Okay, so as you can see, this green line right here points to this, which means that the input is coming from the hypothalamus, limbic system, and higher brain centers. This is the pontine group right there. Okay. But it issues output through the VRG and the DRG. I'm sorry. Output to DRG and VRG. By acting on those centers in the medulla, it hastens or delays the transition from inspiration to expiration, making each breath shorter and shallower, or longer and deeper. The PRG adapts breathing to special circumstances such as sleep, exercise, vocalization, and emotional responses, for example, in crying, gasping, or laughing. Okay, so again, going back to the image, this is the brainstem. We have here the ventral respiratory group, the dorsal respiratory group, and the pontine respiratory group. Now to summarize everything, so the cycle of breathing is automatic and unconscious, and there are 3 respiratory centers. The VRG sets the rhythm of breathing, so how often you are inhaling. The DRG works on inspiration, modifies the rate to adapt to varying condition. And the pontine respiratory group regulates the shift from inspiration to expiration in quiet breathing.